with our Friday, March 9th, 2012 public work session. And the topic for this morning is the discussion of the Town of North Castle Hamlet Design Guidelines. And we have with us this morning the members of the Architecture Review Board. I wanted to just review this with them publicly so that we're all basically have the same concept and on the same page as what we feel we should be looking for going forward. And I think that we've all had a chance to review this. And John, you had some comments about what you thought was important to discuss.
Well, no, I mean, we're talking a little bit because we just, there are a lot of big projects coming up and we want to make sure we're kind of all on the same page and what's the best way to kind of coordinate things and have the, have these projects go forward so that we can, make sure they're developed in the best way possible.
Yes, and we were looking at that. I'm sure I was looking to you as well when you were in my office. That from my experience when I was on Architecture Review Board a couple of years ago, unfortunately, ARB doesn't have any power to follow on our suggestions, follow up. And it happened many times, and Susan knows it best, and she's the longest member, that some people just don't follow it, and they prefer to pay $100 penalty or, and sometimes we feel like it's kind of a waste of time even for us to sit there. And this actually is great, in my opinion, because if town spent money to come up with something like this with those guidelines should be followed, especially in those hamlets areas, because this describes exactly 3 hamlets borders, and the areas which are very important for the look, of the town. Because I think this should be somehow separated. Because myself, this is my personal opinion, I don't care if somebody has 2 acres or 4 acres and is changing the color of the house that much. But those areas in the middle of town, Armonk, Banksville, and North White Plains, I think they should be in the building department. I think they should be in the real estate offices, and everybody who is buying or renting or trying to be in town has to follow those guidelines.
So are you saying that you think in commercial districts there should be a higher standard or more uniformity than in the residential?
I don't know if I would like to put it as commercial, because actually like Main Street is pretty much commercial, but I was at the meetings with those Hamlet design studies, the people, and he's suggesting, I'm talking Sullivan Architects, that those commercial districts in the town like Armonk, they also should have some residential, like for example on top of commercial, because then the town is becoming lively and
So you're really saying the
more
hamlets that they specify.
Exactly. I'm more I'm more saying the hamlets they specify in those borders, and the borders he's talking about, they are directly specified than commercial.
I think this document does a very good job of giving the ARB some ammunition when discussing whether a project is appropriate or not. So not only can they give their specific comments, they can relate it back to a plan and say, this is the type of development we're looking for, and look at page 25. And I think that goes a long way in having some authority to potentially twist someone's arm.
Just to review how the Hamlet Design Guidelines actually got started was there was a gentleman by the name of Chris Santamera that was going to renovate his building across from Citibank. And he owns a lot of buildings in Westchester, a very good developer. He sent plans in to be developed, and they weren't exactly the design the town was looking for. So he did some adjustments to it, and he did that several times, trying to get what the town wanted, because in his goal, he could build an A, B, or C. But if he knew more guidelines of what the town wanted up front, it would save him a lot of money, a lot of heartache, And actually, what happened was he completely stopped and walked from the building, as you know, for an extended period of time. So he said, I spent so much money already with this design. I have so many other buildings I have to focus on. Let me do those, and then I'll come back to town. Well, who was the loss? The town was, because we had this building that wasn't renovated for quite a long time. So he gave the town board a call, and he said, let me come in and give you some suggestions of what my problem was and how we could fix it. So I met with him at the time as a Supervisor Weaver, and he actually suggested to us to do this Hamlet design. He says, why don't you give the builders a feeling of what you want, because then we can hit it right up front. And that's how this actually got started. So then this town board took it further and actually had this commissioned and done. John Sullivan, I think, did a great job with the help of the ARB. It really defines the look, and it helps the builders to hit it right the first time, or at least pretty close. And one of the important things in here is realizing that it does make some conformity to our town, and it also gives people a little bit of flexibility in design, but it makes everybody understand where we're going. I feel right now we don't have that direction of where we're going. And if we have that direction, then the pieces start to fill in. And it'll be really helpful. One of the important things I'm sure we'll focus today is that to have residential mixed within your community. The town of Mount Kisco was, in an afterthought, sorry they didn't do more of it, because their downtown at night becomes sort of desolate. You like stores and then people above, because they're the watchdogs of your community at night. The town of Chappaqua saw that this was important for them, and they have now increased from 2 stories. They allow the buildings to go up 3 stories, but the 3rd story has to be residential. Something for us to think of that in the future, to encourage residential to go above our stores. It feeds all your stores. It makes it fun. It makes the community fun. And it makes your town look really nice. So that was one of the suggestions in here. And I think it's great that we're going to talk about those topics, because those are the exact topics that we have to do: conformity of neighborhood and also residential mixed in. So that's how this all got started.
Actually, we met yesterday with Susan, and we came up with the list, our suggestions, and Susan printed it for everybody.
Oh, great.
So, but I think, I don't know how to do this legally, but I think the very important thing is that people know, buying or renting, that they have to follow up the guidelines.
Yeah, I think what we would do at some point when you're ready, if you feel it's appropriate, after this gets circulated to the whole ARB and they're okay with it, then you put into the ARB code a reference to this manual. That it should be followed, and the ARB is entitled to.
And is this the final version now? This is our
Yeah, this is the
version.
final version that Sullivan prepared for us.
Okay.
And we were talking at the same time as the Hamlet design guidelines, refining our sign code. So that's ready to go too. So whenever we change the ARB code to reference this document, we could also make a zoning code with respect to the signs.
And
We're having a discussion.
What have we done on the sign?
What are we going to do? We
Yeah.
made some, we basically updated the whole thing. I'm not prepared to go through that right now, but there are quite a few changes. And the same Hamlet Design Committee that prepared or spearheaded this document also reviewed the changes to the sign.
When the sign code comes in, it comes in front of the board, and then we review it. And,
Absolutely.
okay. Because, I'm a commercial realtor, I know a lot about signs, and when someone came in recently, Michael Levy came in recently, and he seemed to be a little bit upset because his sign, his colors are yellow and black, that's his company colors. And then he was encouraged that he had to go white and black. Well, that's a big deal for him, and he said,
By the
just,
ARB?
well, I think it was it by
It's on his awning.
Uh,
We were trying to have a consistency of awnings
Sure.
in the town so that you're not having red awning, blue awning, and neon and stripes and the look of the black
But his
awning.
physical sign,
building.
his physical sign was actually made to be black and white. Is that
And
something?
it looks great.
Right.
I know, but is that something?
He's very happy.
Well, I'm just asking as far as a format, are you saying signs in the future have to be black and white? And it
No.
doesn't understand. So why did
It's
he,
on a
why is he
case by
not able
case.
to do the yellow and black? I wasn't sure.
You know, one of the things that we do as a board is we look at the whole property and we look at what they're coming in with and what they're trying to do, proportion-wise, lighting-wise, how it relates to the rest of the building. It's hard to micromanage a sign for this guy and a sign for that one. We're looking at it as a whole. We're looking at the aesthetics of what we want that part of town to look like, as opposed to letting someone come in and just because their colors are hot pink and purple, Dunkin' Donuts, letting them do that. We have been to other towns that have very strict codes with their signs, and you walk into a little town in New Hampshire, and you'll find a Dunkin' Donuts with a very little sign, and people know it's there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
We
1,000%.
want to calm down the town. We don't want, and that's all in here, and we've been discussing this for quite a while.
Right. No, I agree with you
So-
100%. The signs on the buildings what creates the look for the town, and the smaller the sign and the more toned in it could be, the better. I just want to make sure we're not just doing black and white, because in his mind, if there's other signs in town that have a two-color sign, and his isn't, I just want to review the color options that you're making.
Well, we had just done that building. We worked with them very hard
Yeah.
for the colors and the materials of that building. And everything else was falling into line very nicely over there. And we thought, you know, that you weren't on the board then, but, anyway,
I think you also have to start somewhere. I mean, if they're using just the building, we're gonna start with this as the new standard, that's gotta be.
Yeah, a new standard is good for signs, because we could use some toning in on, especially with companies like CVS and such.
This will be a
coming in.
problem with the CVS, and actually I don't know if you guys saw the new CVS in Greenwich, I was passing yesterday.
Yeah.
And the sign is like proportionally, I mean, it's bigger probably, but proportionally the drive is really small and I was looking. It's not like huge screaming.
Yeah, that's a terrific direction.
Yeah.
Well, that's why this meeting is actually very timely, because we'll be looking at those new plans shortly, and it's appropriate for us to make sure we get them the way we want them. I also see on here that you're recommending that substantial financial penalties be increased if people do not abide by it, which I think would be a good idea
This one we
in the Hamlet areas.
we're turning the ARB into a money-making machine.
I don't want that. I'm not looking for that.
Well, I think it's
going to be either
if
nice
that's
or rich.
if that's the outcome of improving the design of the town, that's fine, but we want to improve the design of the town primarily.
No, but
Yeah. And another thing, I think it's very important coming up a little bit further is that talking about money, I think you should come up with the bond, because as we see, people are starting the job and they're not finishing, and it's middle of the town and it looks terrible, that, you know, the town can spend the bond to improve the look, you know, fence or landscape. I think this would be really important.
So
Inside those borders.
are we going through each of these items now, your recommendations, or we'll absorb them and then get back to you?
Yeah, I don't know, we just
You know,
brought the
this,
suggestion.
we're doing stream of consciousness at the moment, but I would say this, because we have learned a lot of lessons over the last 3 or 4 years with, you know, the dump and what happened with that, with Armonk Square, starting putting up the fence, then stopping for a long time, and we had the fence, we finally asked them to move it back because it, you know, looked like Fort Apache in the Bronx. And we pushed it back, but we should have had them put a bench and some landscaping there, which they could have then moved later on, and nothing was in place for that. But now that we know this, we would really like to have these things in place for our town.
You want to go through this list?
Yes, if
Yeah.
you
Sure.
should,
Let's
some
do
of them I
that.
agree with and some I don't.
So, number one,
Diane's a much quicker reader.
number one, Hamlet
The fines,
design.
I'm not into the fines.
The Hamlet Design Study Committee report should be reviewed and approved for use in current development. Hamlet's ARB should have the power to enforce these. Yes, that's exactly what we talked about. That will need to happen. Every realtor, buyer, or potential buyer should be given a copy of the Hamlet Design Guidelines. Well, what we'll do, I think, is we have an electronic version of it, so we'll post this
That would
on our
be
This will
website.
be awesome.
Yeah, for all the,
And in the
for the
application,
commercial.
yeah, and in the application package, we'll put the link to the,
And the
Perfect.
sign guidelines.
we could do
So they
that.
just have a kit when
Yeah.
they show up.
This will be awesome.
That's fine, we could definitely do that. Inside the defined Hamlet areas, the ARB should review every change. That's already in the
Yeah.
code.
Okay, we
Yeah,
just.
that's fine.
Basically, any commercial project requires ARB review, so that I think we're okay with. And outside the Hamlet borders, the RPRC, that's the Residential Project Review Committee, should make the decision to approve or send to the ARB. That is how
That's in place
it's working
now.
now. So that's
Can
good.
I just ask you something on that, Adam? What requires RPRC review? What work being done on a house? If somebody changes the siding, if someone changes the windows, does that require any kind of review or just a permit?
I
Requires a
have
permit.
not seen any siding
No, we've not
changes.
seen some,
come to the
or
ARB.
paint
Don't need
colors.
further anything.
You don't need anything for anything.
But I-
Windows. you
But
know,
I know with the windows, I'm sorry to interrupt you, it's that, because I went through this. The windows, if you are not changing the size of the windows, just replace the same, you don't have to go in front. But if you are changing the sizes of the windows or placement in the building, then I think it used to be that you had to go in front of, to the building department.
Yeah, and the way the code is written now, any building permit for a residential project requires review by the RPRC unless it's an interior building permit. And that isn't good.
That's good.
So I'm sorry to say this, so the windows, if you're not changing the size, it does not require.
I don't think so.
A
but-
permit.
Yeah, we have not
No.
reviewed any.
Did you get the such windows?
We haven't reviewed any. If someone's replacing their roof, we're not.
Right.
It's very important for us to make it friendly
Right.
for the people who live here to do construction on their house.
Absolutely.
You don't want to add on a deck and find out it's going to take you 8 months to get this.
Right.
Right.
You want, you know,
Taking that,
But we're saying residential within the hamlets, the defined hamlets will,
I think they should come in from the very, inside the hamlet.
right.
What areas?
You mean a
Of
single
course,
family
of
house?
Well, for example, if somebody, a house on,
Because those are areas everybody
That's the
sees.
road, or is the house right on the
Yeah.
other side by the,
if it's in a defined
it's in the
hamlet,
Hamlet area.
Yeah, I think everybody in the hamlet area should go in.
All right, well, then we'd have to change.
This is the look everybody sees every
Yeah.
day, and we don't want somebody purple house or something, you know what I mean?
But it says that.
Yeah.
It says inside the defined hamlet areas.
Well, I was thinking only
he
commercial.
was thinking, I think he was.
Yeah.
No.
but commercial and residential within the hamlet.
All right, we just have to we'd have to make some changes to make that happen. You don't want to leave it up to the RPRC to make that decision, right? I mean, we can have that,
Well, there's an ARB member on the RPRC.
Yeah.
Yes.
no,
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. If something goes to the RPRC and it's a minor, and they
Right.
will have a representative from the ARB on
Yeah.
the RPRC,
Okay.
and that person could say, yeah, no, that's what the ARB approves and likes, it could stop there, because I don't want it then to have to flip out and go to ARB all the time.
Yeah.
Same thing like minor, like we just did for conservation. But if it's a major thing and that person says, this is a little beyond just my decision, then it comes out and goes to ARB. Because there's two facets to this. One is making sure it's done right, and two, trying to alleviate some of the process if necessary or possible. So that's really important. When you come in here today, if there's suggestions, you could say to us, we've been approving these things on ARB, and people have been coming in front of us, but not necessarily we think they should have to.
Well,
We'd
that's
love
what
to
we just
hear that
said.
too, right. So there's two ends, what you think has to go in front of you, what
We
you
just
just
said that.
has gone in front of you and doesn't have to in the future.
So does that, you think that's satisfactory, since there's a representative of the ARB on
I think, yeah,
on that
because,
board.
Yeah, and I think we'll all be cognizant that if it's in the Hamlet area, there might be a little higher
Higher,
threshold on a referral to
Right.
the ARB. And I think that's
That's fine.
what is happening.
because if the member of the ARB will not be sure what to do, then he will refer to the
Right.
person.
And you're talking
That's
about
fine.
a small finding, we can quantify the number of retail, residential units
Within the
in
hamlet.
each Hamlet area.
You know, there's some in Banksville, there's a little bit.
Not quite
in
nice.
We
North-
can quantify that.
Yeah,
So,
that's fine.
It's not a,
Under the RC, I was just, because I just went through this with the house across the street, I was a little, I guess, and I don't want over-regulation or stopping you, but I was a little concerned that I had zero idea as the neighbor directly across. I had zero idea what was going on. Not that I think public hearings needs to be held, because I
This is
think
the
that's a
biggest
little bit
problem for
over.
me too.
But my biggest concern was I'm at a cul-de-sac, and, you know, my little kids play in the cul-de-sac, and I was concerned about where the driveway would enter. Because further away from the cul-de-sac is obviously a safer thing for my children to play. And it just, when I finally saw the builder out there, he said, I'm done with all the approvals. So I was just a little taken back that there wasn't any, at least, just,
But I-
there's even an application in front of RPRC. It's up to the neighbor to go find out what it is. I just had no
Yeah.
clue. And then,
Maybe,
and I think that was a conscious decision by the town board to do that. Really wanted to expedite these approvals. If it meets the codes and it's reviewed and there are no issues, then.
but do you think that it should,
That certainly could be revisited if.
well, I don't want to get it into, and maybe just because it's in my backyard, so to speak, I'm a little more sensitive to it as
I
probably
think
all are.
every neighbor is sensitive, and maybe it should be put in the whatever directions that everybody who is going in front of RPAC should notify the neighbors.
You could, but
Because
then
then
that's, I'm
Right,
sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
You could do that, but I think that would be a significant cost to, well, timing, if you do that, and then the contention that we've seen in the past when,
Which we don't want.
That
when
we
we
had
have
such
these
a
types of
potential.
approvals. I mean, that was one of the main reasons why we tried to get them out of the planning board. And we saw many examples of that type of, quote, as of right development causing significant strife in the neighborhood. So I think you should think hard about it.
Yeah, because I do agree. I went through it in building my house a few years back,
Yeah.
and it was a grueling process. So I think if you're not looking for any variances, I think the town board was right in trying to speed things along. I guess I'm just trying to balance, and not that I would even need to know everything or have to get out there, but I just wish somebody would just say, "You guys looking to build a house?
Yeah.
Here's a site plan."
We could
I don't know.
put
I
a
don't
sign out there.
Maybe a sign would be great.
Yeah. Something that
No,
the
but
neighbors.
Something we're under review.
I mean, I don't want to complain. I don't want to make it
No, but,
difficult.
but you're right, I would
They
like
like
to
the
know.
building permit sign that people have to put out when they're doing kind of sign like that.
Well, what signs do we put out currently? Put one out for planning board
Must be in
review.
front of time.
What else?
Zoning board,
Mhm.
and then a building permit has to be posted if you.
But
If,
then this
could
is
we
after-
put out just a little sign that says, this property will be up for our PRC review, and just do it
I would do
1
that.
week before.
We could.
And that way the neighbors will drive by, and if they have issues,
I don't want to get too, it's a slippery slope. So
Yeah.
it's
I think it's a very slippery slope.
Yeah.
Let me throw this in, because it's a good point, but when it goes to the RPSC, for the most part, it's within code. So if it's within code, you know, not to throw this on you or any other homeowner, but you should be aware of what's allowed to have happen around you.
Yeah.
Right? And it might be incumbent upon any homeowner to know what could be built or what could be done around you within the code. Because then you start this slippery slope, like you said, where you start to add more regulation, and people are saying, listen, this defeats the purpose. I'm doing it the way the code says, so I can streamline my process, but now you're slowing me down again.
Right. And you give, and
I
there
don't
are
know
cases.
I don't know how you.
You know what, I think now that we're discussing this, and again, I think we are probably better off the way it is, and although I'd like to kind of know, I don't think I as a homeowner should stop something that is within or even slow down something that's within code and doesn't need any variances or the like. So I guess I brought it up because it's a little bit fresh in my mind. But in looking at it from a town perspective rather than a personal perspective, I don't think we should over-regulate it.
And we are looking at those issues. You know, when it comes before the RPRC, we're making sure that there's adequate screening, we're making sure that the driveway is
Yes.
in a reasonable.
We're always asking
In
where
fact,
are the
that
neighbors?
house, we spent 2
Yes.
meetings on that house, dealing with the developer and trying to get a better site plan. This was on Sterling Road.
Yep.
if you remember.
Yeah, having just started with the RPRC, I can tell you that people find their way to us anyway.
They sit in the kitchen.
And they sit in this really grungy area behind where the building department is. And we're fairly generous. So the people who show up have no right actually to speak. It's not a public meeting, but we hear them, we live. So I think putting out signs and slowing the RPRC down will absolutely begin to erode its benefit. And I vote against that.
Thank you for letting me go through the cycle, and I'm coming back to the same, you let me get out what I wanted to
It
say.
just brings us to the thought that the town is as good as the people on the board. So we really try and put qualified people on the board to help us with these decisions, so as of right, things can just flow through.
All right, all matters of aesthetic impact should include input from an ARB, town government, we need town government projects, I'm assuming.
We did have an issue.
I think that is wise.
Let me just throw this issue out at you. We had an issue with the new firehouse, not the one in Banksville, that's great, but the one right on 22. They never landscaped. They put up a tombstone sign, and this is so highly visible, and it never did come to us. So we feel that anything that's being built in town should come to us and be, bound by these guidelines.
I agree, because
Yes.
it's your professional help that makes the town look good, whether it's for a resident of the town or not, we appreciate it.
And we'd still like to see the fire department put up some trees or bushes or something.
It may be an all-encompassing requirement of any building, because fire district doesn't really fall under our auspices. They have to.
Most of these things you can review and have input on. Some of it is overlapping with the planning board, like landscaping and the location of the electric utilities. But I think the planning board would always welcome the ARB's comment on any of these aspects. The one thing that you wouldn't have input on is outdoor seating from restaurants. That's regulated by a separate chapter of the town code.
But we are talking only of aesthetics of the seating.
Yeah, but the town board has expressly allowed the building inspector to have domain over that, so the planning board doesn't review outdoor seating from restaurants, and the ARB does not.
But what we meant, for example, like it happens in Europe all the time in the old towns, that suddenly Coca-Cola umbrellas are showing up or
Oh, no,
Budweiser.
but-
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I'm talking
no.
about aesthetics. I'm
No,
not
no.
talking about the amount of seating, or
Okay.
I'm looking at the look of the
Yeah.
chair or the table.
The look of the chair,
That's what I'm talking about.
and
We are-
it's the building inspector.
It's all defined, right?
Yeah, the building inspector allows it, but it's already codified, they do not allow that in advertising on the furniture.
If the ARB wanted to look at the definition of what we're allowing the building inspector to do for outdoor seating, have they ever received that and given us comment on it?
I don't know, I don't think so.
I think it's defined pretty clearly, so.
That's great.
Substantial financial penalties enforced for infractions. The ARB wants the authority to fine or stop construction. The code's not set up for any board to issue fines. It's set up that the town board can define what the fine would be, but it's up to the justice court to impose that fine. So the ARB would not be able to do that.
We just want some teeth.
Yeah, well, the town board could look at what the fines are, the maximum penalty, and potentially increase them.
I mean, we're dealing with you know, we had an issue with an important building in town, and we did not approve their paint color, and they put it up before our approval. And then once it got up and we said, what color are you painting the building? They said, well, we use this fancy stucco and the paint color's in it, and if we paint over it, it's gonna be a financial hardship, and on and on. We never approved their paint color. We had no recourse to say, you know, because he did this, now you're gonna be fined, or they would have understood, if we do this paint color without the approval, we're gonna be fined, so therefore let us think about it before we do it.
This is a topic we can look at closer, and off the top of my head, I don't know how that section is written. You know, what are the penalties and how it's.
Are those kinds of things tied to the ability to get a CO? I mean, that's how you do
They're
it.
certainly tied to the site plan. So I think you could probably make an argument that if it's not done correctly, it's a violation of the site plan, which then has penalties built into it. And if the code's not clear with respect to that, then we could make it clear.
We want the builders to understand this at the start of the project,
Correct.
Right.
because then
And
there's
respect
no
the
problem.
process, respect the process.
And respect the process. Once you're well in the process and they do something and then they say, oh, we had to get the sign up because we needed something or other, so we put the sign up, but now we want your approval. And now it's our logo, so if you're not approving it, it's, I mean,
We'd
we've gone
rather
through,
pay the penalty, but we're gonna, you know what I mean?
but
Well,
we've
you want-
been,
you want it-
we've
you
well
want it
been
baked in
through
before
this.
the design process
Exactly.
even starts. You want them to understand
Right,
that there are certain guidelines.
That's why this is a very important document for us.
Now, at the end of the day, you may never be satisfied, because typically what the courts are looking for and what the town wants is compliance. So rather than, if they do something wrong without approval, it's fairly typical that the court will say, you have to go to the ARB and do what they say, rather than imposing a fine, which at the end of the day is what we wanted anyway.
At the end of the day, everybody prefers to pay fine and get over with, and that's what this person did. And then, you know, and then the town still looks like we don't want them to look. This is,
Yeah, that's not a good.
That's why you're focusing on the sticker penalties.
I mean,
That way there's not an incentive.
Going
to
into
sidestep
it,
the
if
process.
you do something you're not approved for, you will be fined X.
Ultimate
We don't
matter.
actually want to fine them,
But
we want to
I
threaten
think
them.
the way it should work,
yeah.
if they've paid a penalty, that means the court determined that they did something wrong. But that doesn't typically give them the ability to then just ignore it. It's still a problem if there's the approval. So
But
to close that loop.
Can I tell you something? When I was on ARB before, one of the lawyers came to us, and I remember his name, and he said, but you are only the board who can recommend. And I said to him, yes, but you should follow our recommendation. And he said, no, you can only recommend. And he's right, because it turns out that we can only recommend. So all our time and all this money spent by the town, it turns out that this is a waste of money and time, everybody's time, because we can only recommend.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah,
not
this is
really
our
right.
And we also didn't have this then, which
Right.
is a whole different situation now.
And what the ARB is recommending gets approved. You know, gets approved by the planning board. This is what they have to build. There's no wiggle room there.
Or not, but the ultimate control relates in site plan approval, because assuming that the planning board, I mean, this has to be something that comes to the planning board. ARB makes a bunch of recommendations. It still can be argued before the planning board that those recommendations shouldn't be followed. Most likely that wouldn't hold water. And the planning board then makes that part of site plan approval. That's your ultimate control, because that controls CO. And more, you know, you can find someone and they can pay it, but they can't pay you off for not having a CO. They even can open their business and operate. You could give them a temporary CO, but that it's now a lien on his title. So that's the teeth. I don't think you need to fine. I think you need
Whatever, I
to.
mean,
We need to be sure that recommendations that are precious to everybody wind up being a condition of site plan approval. And then once you have approved that site plan,
That's fine.
there is where, everything's not checked off, there's no CO until it's corrected. So now you even could make him repaint the building because he has to do it.
I think this how it should work, because.
Which, I'm not sure that that system doesn't now exist. Perhaps it's not being followed, but well, everything I just said doesn't require anything new to be done. I don't think.
No, that is how it works.
So how did that happen?
I do not know.
Well, it requires a level of follow-up and control at the government level that in order to have, because if something slips between the crack and he painted his building pink and he got a CO, you can't go back and take it away. So it requires, some careful oversight, and someone has to really go through the checklist before a CO is issued. You won't
Who is
imagine,
someone?
Armonk
We
Square,
never gave that approval.
take Armonk Square.
Oh,
There's a document.
That building.
There's a document, a site plan approval document for Armonk Square, that's probably 5 or 6 pages long, of things that they have to do before they get a CO. I'm telling you, there's 50 things, at least 50 things.
Who
So
is
if you-
responsible of checking that?
Well, the building
Building
department has to, uses that document in their review. They're
So
the body that has to enforce these approvals.
So theoretically, if the sign is wrong, then they should not get CO, correct?
Yeah, or they're going to be hit with a violation of the site plan.
But
That's exactly how it happened.
Well, but before they got hit with a violation, because now it's in the court, and now it's a whole argument, but before it got there, the government officials involved, which in this case would be the building inspector, shouldn't issue a CO until he's satisfied. And if he has a question as to whether that meets it or not, he can call you, he can call me, he can call anyone to say, well, this is kind of, but he has the opportunity to be sure that every single one of those requirements are met, or
I think-
withhold the CO.
What happened with this building was they needed to start business. And the building was basically done. And it was at a time of year where they couldn't have repainted until the spring. So it was like, let's give them a temporary and whatever. And it just kind of floated into permanent because they came with a sob story
Well,
of how they couldn't repaint, and they came with a very highly paid color expert to tell us how this color was the best color in the entire world for this building. In a lot of words.
right, that's a perfect example, and that's what a temporary CO is for, and they should be granted for that reason. But you don't want to make the retailer miss the Christmas season. So he hasn't got a sign perfect, or you give him a temporary CO, but the operative word is temporary, and they don't automatically become, he has to still get a permanent CO. A temp doesn't help him.
So
We
this
were
is the
worn
matter,
down.
so this is
Yeah.
the matter of strongly enforcing.
The rules that we already have,
Exactly.
which is what we're finding in a lot of cases.
Again, this guideline will be helpful. If we go on to just our suggestions at the end, that moving forward, if we could have buried telephone cables and electric wires,
Yeah,
In the
we
commercial,
already
if we
require
could do that.
Yep.
But wait, can I make a comment? I
Right,
mean,
that's a big topic.
I know it's
you can't-
expensive.
You can't, I'll tell
These
you.
are suggestions, these are,
I get it, but just understand, commercially, if you're on the other side of the street, the expense of doing that is prohibitive. You can't do a crossing Main Street. You can't imagine what's under Main Street.
Yeah, that's typically what we'll do, is if the service is on the other side, the pole goes in across the street and then goes into the.
Well, that's okay, but you have to understand,
this is a
Not fair.
suggestion, if it's possible moving forward, it would be a wonderful thing.
Well, just so you know, the town has been meeting with Lynn Starr, and Adam and I have been at those meetings, and Kelly was there,
Yeah.
so. It was a goal that the town's been trying to achieve, as we've spoken to the ERB in the past, to get the wires from Main Street underground. So we went through this, or what?
Or move.
Oh, move them, right, or move them all the way to the back. So we did start that process, and we were hoping with the development of Armonk Square, if the sidewalks being ripped up, it's a perfect opportunity to think, we're ripping up, let's see if we can at least put the pipes underground, and so in the future, when we drop the wires, it's all there. So we're starting that process, because there's nothing better for this town than to have the wires underground aesthetically. It would just bring us, you know, to a beautiful looking town. So although it's expensive, we started the process to see the phases of doing it. We've walked Main Street, I've been there with Lynn Starr, we had a whole huge crowd of people over Con Ed, Verizon, because it's not just the wires, when one goes down, they all have to go down. So there's like 6 or 8 companies there all seeing how they could do it. So it's a progressive move for us to do it, but we're starting that path.
Bedford Village is in the middle of a very extensive study of this right now for the village ranges, you know, and they've actually asked me to meet with them on that, coordinate.
Has anyone come up with a number of what that would be?
Yeah, every time we get the number, it goes up a little.
It's gotta be a huge number.
Millions.
It depends on
That's
how
why
we do
we're,
it.
that's why we're talking about moving them,
Yes.
and that could be probably in the hundreds of thousands, rather than burying it.
Yeah, there's different options of doing it.
It's expensive either way.
Right, but there's different options. One is moving them to the back parking lot, and the other is putting it all underground, or phase some underground, some above in certain areas. So we're trying to phase it in, but we really would love to have it done. We're so happy to hear the ARB trying to push us in that direction, because it needs that focus. It needs a lot of voices to say out there, focus on this and let's get this done.
Well, the other things we discussed, having a bond for all commercial buildings in case they stop their project, so that we can have them, you know, make it look good while they start, you know.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to talk to Roland about, whether we can collect that bond, but I think it's a good idea, we should explore
A
it.
performance bond, we don't
Well,
have that?
yeah.
Well, this is
Make a
for not for performance of a public utility, so we'll collect bonds and say, you have to make sure that the water main gets in, and the sewer gets in, and the sidewalks are done, but not, we don't collect a bond to say that if you decide not to build a project, or stop in the middle of the project, that there'll be some money available for site cleanup. That's not a typical bond we would collect.
Do other towns do that?
I have to look into it, honestly.
Because, you know, in this trying times, there's a lot of builders, oh, I have all intentions of doing it, all of a sudden their lease falls through and they can't finish it. We're stuck with a shell.
You can't, my view is you can't do that. I mean, for a major developer, for example, again, Armonk Square, they'll have to post, in order to even get a temporary CO, they would have to post a bond, for example, if they haven't fixed the sidewalks. That's standard. For these small, first of all, bonds today are impossible to get. To get it, Mike will tell you this, no bank is giving a bond. You have to be so strong to get a bond, you might as well put the cash out, because you need to have so much surplus cash, so forget it. But there is a way. In the private sector, what we do is if a tenant has a requirement to do something and doesn't do it, we have self-help clauses in all of our leases that, and the town can do this, and I know other towns have. If a person is found in violation of anything, the self-help clause allows whomever is party to that agreement to go in and make the change itself, and add a 20% fee for its trouble. So it has real teeth. So and this goes to your next point too. So if there's a facade falling apart or a sign that doesn't work, after notice and time to cure, you can actually go in, make that repair, and build it back. And in the case of a town, you can make that a lien on the title of the property. And if you've drafted this would have to, I don't think you could make this going back, but for new owners, you might even be able to make it a tax lien, which would prime his lender. So you would be in first position the same way you are with your property taxes. So that's the remedy, because making a bond requirement, believe me, it will scare everyone around. People will say, don't go there because you need a bond and I can't get a bond.
Okay, that sounds
That's
good.
very, yeah.
There's one other point that is not on here. The town of Greenwich is where the IGA was in Banksville, So that has nothing to do with our town, but that affects our town and that affects Banksville. And I don't know if there's anything that you as the government can do to speak to the town of Greenwich to help get that property cleaned up, looking better, rented out, whatever.
Well, it's
Because-
currently being.
Yeah, you know it's being redeveloped right now.
No, I didn't know. That's great. Someone bought it?
Who is coming there?
Well, I'm not sure who's coming there, but the owner
The
is
plans and everything that
renovating
they
the
have.
property
That's
to try and spiff it up so they can get tenants in there,
Yeah,
because it's
that's
so dilapidated
great.
looking.
Sure. That's
So,
awesome.
Okay.
That's awesome.
That was of concern, but that's wonderful news.
Yeah, it was in the paper,
Which paper?
the grant.
Oh, I didn't. Okay,
Just
that's,
to add to Bob's point, I think it's probably a good middle ground to do it that way. But how do we balance it so a property owner, they're investing in our town, doesn't feel that they're at the mercy of the tenant? Are you able to set up certain guidelines to say this is the minimum repair that needs to happen? That way we're not, you know what I'm saying? So if I own a property and I say, well, you know, I'm gonna get that done, and I don't get it done in time. The government comes in and says, well, we fixed it for 20 grand. And you're thinking, that would have cost me 4 grand, I'm getting. So I think the concept is great. Is there a way to set up guidelines so that way where the government isn't
Yeah. The
have
way-
too much latitude, but it gets the job done?
Think of the government as the landlord, and
Right.
everyone in town are their tenants. So imagine it's one big shopping center, except you, in a sense, you own it. You don't really. But it's really a self-policing thing, because in my experience, I've almost never had to use that. The fact that it's there. And so that what it has to be is if you have fair and reasonable notice and fair and reasonable opportunities to cure, no one minds that going in, because no one goes in thinking, I'm gonna be a bad guy and I'm gonna let my storefront look like, look bad. So it's never, and then everyone signs off on that provision, because everyone thinks, sure, I'm gonna keep my property up just like everyone next to me. And if something happens because I get sick, I lose town, something terrible happens, I lose my tenants, yeah, now you have the ability, but the approval, the cure periods are generous, and that'll keep it doesn't become an unfair state or big brother.
And that's the balance, because also knowing the other side of it with investors on property and the economy, capital is tight. Liquidity is tight, so if somebody is struggling with a property to rent it, and it might be in somewhat disrepair, they may physically not have it. Now, it may actually help them to have the municipality do it at a fair cost, and then if there's a lien there, eventually, once they rent the property, then they could satisfy that lien and it'll be cleared up. So,
You
I
could
just want to
also,
make sure we're fair about it with the property.
you could also reduce the self-help requirement well beyond what a landlord in a shopping center. For example, we have a tenant and his roof leaks. I can make him fix his roof. The town may not care about his roof leak if it's not visible. You may limit your self-help to his signage, to his facade, to his doorways, to his sidewalk, to things that are affecting the appearance and bothering others. And the back of the house problems that a landlord might be concerned with wouldn't have to be included in those self-help requirements. So it makes them less onerous or less.
Right.
And I think Bob was really correct about the generous time to fix. I'll give you, for example, we have a house that burned down on Greenway, and they put a tarp up and had been disrepair for quite a while. Now, we kind of all know that insurance companies are very slow giving you money for repairs and renovating. It's been about a year. The neighbors now were distressed with the look of the house. And I personally called the builder and explained the situation, and within a week he came out. So I mean, you can use some persuasion, and I think that having that gives you even more key. But I don't think I agree with Bob. You rarely ever come to the point where you'd have to enforce that. Rarely, but it's nice to have it.
You may never.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think the mechanism for doing that, the New York State Building Code has a property maintenance clause, but we could go potentially and adopt our own local version of that, not superseding the state building code, but dealing with maintenance, and this is something I could research and see, talk to you. That'd probably be the way to.
This is very important.
And kind of get into like a specific situation, so a tenant comes and leases space and they want to put up a new sign. But they put up a temporary sign. What kind of guidelines do we have in terms of when a new sign has to come up, or when the actual sign has to go up? Because it seems to me, I drive around and see temporary signs that have been up.
There are limited temporary signs. There is a section of the zoning code that allows temporary signs, but they're for specific things, and there's a time limit on it. Any new sign needs to be reviewed by the ARB and approved by the building department. A freestanding sign has an extra layer of then needing planning board approval, where is that freestanding sign going to sit on the property. So I think that's well codified. If there are temporary signs that are exceeding the temporary nature, then we'll have to let the building department know about that.
Do you mean like temporary, you show up in the morning, they're gone at night?
No, I'm
No.
specifically thinking of the ice cream place, that sign, I don't know what sign, I mean,
It's a banner sign.
yeah, it's a
right?
banner sign, I mean, is that,
I don't know if that's even,
I mean, that
Supposed to be
has
there.
been up there for
Yeah, I don't know.
like 5 or 6 months.
did that come under the ARB?
No.
And
So
I mean,
technically,
just,
that's-
now I'm not gonna get any ice cream.
Yeah.
You might not get any sneakers or hot dogs either.
But I'll have my house. Yeah, I mean,
It's also interesting that if you don't have a sign, that's a violation. You have to actually have signage if you have a location.
Because I know the little burger joint came to us, and they wanted a big sign, on McDonald and on Bedford.
The roof mounted sign.
They wanted every sign. They said, no one knows what's
See it
here.
from the air.
And we said to them,
Put
put up a big sign.
These guys have big ambitions.
We had said to them, put something that's highly visible and have it up for a month or
Right.
two,
Yeah.
so everyone will know, and then take it down. And that was our compromise to them.
I just had a couple comments on, I know we didn't know we go through this list, but, and Diana mentioned too, there was some, but not all, that you would agree with. The stuff that involves green, like compost and green space, I'm not so sure I want to ever be that. I think that'd be a complete disincentive for somebody to say, I'm gonna start a compost by being
No.
environmental, but I gotta get an ARB approval.
No, not residential
Okay.
at all.
And then there is an item that has become very prominent in town. I'm not sure I want more regulation on it, but it may be worth talking about is generators. There's a ton of generator permits that are being issued. It's in the code now. The code was rewritten a few years ago to allow for it. Sometimes there's a variance that's needed depending on how the property's configured. I just wanted to bring it up. It may be part of ARB if there's a variance that's needed and there's landscaping that's needed around it.
The landscaping is key to any really ugly thing on a property
Right.
that maybe a neighbor will say.
But is this planning board form generator?
No, the code was rewritten.
Code is the code.
And
Okay.
it permits it via building permit, as long as it's not located in the front yard and,
What about the setbacks?
so it's allowed to be half the setback, so it's considered an accessory structure. So it can be half the side yard setback, half the rear yard setback, for half of what a house would look like.
And it doesn't say anything about screening?
It does, no, it says that before the building permit can be issued by the building department, it has to be screened.
It'd be treated like an air conditioning compressor,
Yeah, right.
same,
Yeah, so
everybody the same size.
Right.
And it further regulates when the generator can be exercised, basically during weekday work hours.
Talking about landscaping, if the ARB could pay close attention to the landscape requirements of what we're requiring now for residential, I think is doing pretty good. But look at the commercial area, because we have 2 prominent gas stations that, many other towns are trying to encourage them to put some type of landscaping on the property. So, and then the other thing is also when something dies, it's a matter of keeping up with the site plan. Once the tree dies, doesn't mean you just pave it in and it's gone, you have to replace. So that's a part of property maintenance.
I
So if you
agree
could
with
just
you.
talk, talk with Adam about that and see if our codes are up to par of the best landscaping we can have for our downtown area, and then also the upkeep of the landscape. It may start off all fine and good, but as years go on, things have to be replaced.
It's all about follow-through, and having staff to do it. The way our approvals are structured, it's very explicit that anything that dies has to be replaced in the next growing season. But obviously, someone needs to go out there and check.
Well, how can we actually go out there and check? I mean, we have a finite number of properties here in town. Do we take out the original site plan of what they were approved on and match it up?
Yeah.
And then, I know we don't have the staff right now, haven't been doing that in the past, but is that a possibility for us to start and make this happen? I know I've spoken to you about this
You would, yes,
before.
and you just
It's
have to
important to
direct,
me.
direct your code enforcement officer, that's a duty that he's ordered to do.
So you think it's a physical, like we have old, some of these buildings are really old, what if we don't have
There
the
are
original site
there are
plan?
plenty of properties, right, that don't have,
Yes.
don't have a landscaping plan or even a site plan, and then the town's in a much more difficult position.
Then what do we do? Do we say you're supposed to have 30% of your unused walkways, or, I know we have certain percentages that are
Yeah,
supposed to
they
be
might not be
landscaped.
subject to that, but, that use may have occurred before that law went
Their
into effect.
grandfather.
Yeah, grandfathered essentially, yeah. So anything that has an approved site plan, yes, the code enforcement officer can compare it to. Anything that's older and doesn't have an approved site plan, yeah, you're not gonna really have the ability to say, well, the code now says you have to have 30%.
Right. So we just hope they come in to renovate, because
Right,
they
yeah.
have site plan.
Well, yes, that's fine.
The new properties, there is a code, I know there's in the code, a certain amount of percentage for the parking lots, of
Yes,
landscaping.
landscaping and sidewalks.
Can we as a town board just agree that we'd like the inspector to go out and maybe at some time when he feels appropriate to start going building by building to see, without too much hardship for the building owners, but at least get an idea of where we stand with this, because downtown is lacking landscape, and it's unnecessary to be in that condition. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think you have to know which buildings have the landscape plan requirements.
Who determines, excuse me, who determines the code enforcement's schedule? Who does it report to? Who can send him where? Who has that authority?
He works under the building inspector.
Who is the building inspector now?
That's Mike Crum.
So if there's an issue, it should be investigated, it has to go through Mike.
If there's a code enforcement issue, like if someone calls the planning department and says, I see something that shouldn't be, I'll typically just tell the code enforcement officer, do it. Doesn't necessarily go to the building inspector first, unless it's something.
Since we have
get involved.
assistant building inspectors at the moment, we really don't have an
They'd
official.
like
Oh,
it,
okay.
I guess, right?
Yeah,
Mike is acting as
Bill Micro, I think.
Because, I'm on the beautification community liaison, and that's their top priorities, to get landscaping downtown. And if we're able to get some of that landscaping downtown through a mechanism we already have at our fingertips, I'd like to initiate that to happen and get, the plan started, how we're gonna start to get landscaping downtown, because the beautification's been tapping me on the shoulder to make this suggestion, so here I am.
Well, it's probably, in North White Plains, you probably have many more of those buildings with a site plan, so you could easily go and see that the landscaping is, right, they're all, you've got a lot more newer buildings. You should.
Yes and no. Gerster has a new site plan. Of course, the Stop and Shop shopping center has a new site plan. There's a handful. A bunch of them don't. Dressel's probably doesn't.
Yeah, that's a hard one, because that one really needs it.
Oh, yes,
Right.
yes,
Montalona does, but he just had site plan.
right.
And then there's Sir John's and Santa Mary's, he has it. So, North White Plains, we have
Yeah,
a lot of new buildings. There's a
commercial.
building that just sold recently, it's been the opiate distributor.
Yeah.
And I think we can do pretty good in North White Plains
Yeah.
because it really helped the whole community. It just looks so barren there. And if there's one building that doesn't have it, then we're at a loss with one building, but the rest could make up for it. And the same thing with, Banksville, and of course, Hamlet and Armonk. Can we start this process? Can you give encouragement?
Well, this is just having a code enforcement
Yeah, it's just
officer
that, it's
enforce
just-
code.
I know,
Right.
we have to encourage them to actually go and get the site plans, take it out and go, street by street, develop a plan. Can we ask for a plan for him to tell us what his schedule's like and how to, what his process would be for going through this? Because the beautification committee would love to see that there's a
Why
process
doesn't
in
the
motion.
beautification committee go in and pull some plans and actually give them some direction?
I mean, they could look, they're not architects or landscape architects. I mean, if you want us to actually stand and make them pull up plans.
This is basically getting the site plans.
The site plans.
and
It's in the building
check,
department.
right? What is
The
that?
site plans would be, they're all on file.
I don't think.
Yeah.
So do you want to pull them out and we'll put them on his desk? Maybe 3 buildings a month or whatever.
However.
I think ask him, I mean, it's his, yes, Cromwell, to
It's
develop the
it's
plan.
not really
I'm
Makes sense.
uncomfortable,
Yeah, but maybe if we could ask Cromwell, this is a thought that came up in a work session, if he could give us some feedback and how he thinks it could be brought about to happen.
I mean, is there certain properties that you know already?
Yeah,
That's
just
an
got
issue?
all,
Well, perhaps.
no, all the gas stations and the
I
whole
mean, if there's anything
town.
that you know specifically,
Yeah.
maybe from a direction from the supervisor
Sure.
to the building inspector to say, either you have them, or could you pick 5?
Right.
Do a start, get back to me in 2
Would
weeks
you
or
like the
something.
beautification?
And then let's see what it is. And
Yeah.
if he's discovering stuff,
Also-
okay, there's a problem.
So it's
I
also.
would recommend you just give him direction to look at the Hamlets, pull the plans, and, come up with a schedule of doing it.
Good, okay, I think that's a good start.
They got the direction of the supervisor, that way they'd be accountable to the building inspector and to you, it makes sense. And if Diane has specifics, hey, these are 5 that we highlighted, maybe start there.
Sure.
Now, in regards to that, I have a question for the board that's here tonight, this morning. I got a call from Benedict's Nursery about putting out the baskets of flowers. We want to do that again this year.
Yeah, the beautification actually is going to, we met last week, and we have several companies that they're looking at to purchase the baskets. We had a meeting with Sue Snyder and also Don Brandis, who actually physically, puts the baskets out and because it's drip fed. And we're going to be doing, we have a whole plan that's coming forward to the town board of beautification next year's, and it includes the baskets, but also includes providing a sign for, in North White Plains, there's a little sign that says, "Welcome to North White Plains." And we want to landscape all around that, make that really beautiful and make that the best it could be. And then also provide a sign for the Hamlet of Armonk saying, "Welcome to the Hamlet of Armonk." And then provide one for Banksville, "Welcome to Banksville." And then landscape all around it. It's a small little project, but it's something this new beautification can grab hold on and claim and make it look really nice. We also had the garden club come meet with us, and they are in the process of doing these really exciting plans. They like to do under the eagle, and we thought, keep in mind, you're gonna spruce that up, take some plants out, move it around, maybe putting the sign, "Welcome to the Hamlet of Armonk" there, and develop that into their plan. And Sue, we were going to be calling Sue for some feedback on sign design and wording, and, I guess go in front of the whole ARB, so that's an appropriate mix for today.
Yes.
So that's something that they're looking forward to doing. They have a little budget that they're going to work with, and it's an exciting project.
So getting back to the baskets, so
So the pricing now.
Did I hear you guys decide on
Yes,
baskets?
we're meeting on
I
baskets.
think Diane's in favor of it.
He's one of the possibilities for putting the baskets out. And they're reviewing the pricing, and they're very budget conscious.
So I'll wait to hear from you before.
Yes, wait here. I spoke to Sue from the
Yes,
Sue
I'd
Capola
like
from the
that.
office. We are doing baskets, we're just pricing them at this point.
His price is $1,000.
Yes, his price is there.
So that's in
For
the,
20 baskets.
That's in the beautification.
Yeah, beautification budget, yes.
Just trying to think outside the box with some of the older properties that there is no legitimate site plan that we can follow. Is there a way where, and we all know dollars are an issue, but maybe there's grants available or there's donations from local nurseries that we could go to those property owners and say, look, we'd like to do the initial install of some landscaping here. And maybe a small tree, not big dollars, but then have them agree to maintain it thereafter. And that's kind of bringing them, into the fold. I don't know if that's an option.
It's a wonderful idea, it really is, and that could fold into the beautification committee. So if we really are so interested, this one spot is just not going to fix itself up, and we have a little budget in coordination with the garden club maybe, you know, that's a final option for us, because the beautification is just determined to get landscaping in our hamlets, so.
Do you think we could exchange from them we'll do this for you in exchange for maybe a revised site plan or something which is
Or
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, just some kind of like, look, we want to do this, we're going to do the initial
start,
install, and just, you know, you agreed to maintain this going forward.
But the town, the town couldn't spend tax dollars on private property. You could do things in the right of way.
It'll be in
In
the
the
right
right
of way.
But if it's a donation from someone else,
Like adopt a park
Well,
type of thing.
along those lines, I was wondering if there's something, you know, how do you address the signage issue with these existing, property owners? And are there incentives or way to,
existing signs that wouldn't comply with the code.
Exactly. So we
Well,
can get
that's-
more, I mean, because that's, it really, when you go to a town that has
You have,
kind of the uniformity, it really does make a
you
difference.
have options. I mean, the way it's currently written, they're just grandfathered. But you can say after 10 years or after 5 years, all signs have to come in compliance with the code.
Oh, I like that.
You have to.
Good idea.
I actually like that.
Oh, that's so great,
Oh,
because
can't
it's a
shop
finite
anywhere.
time. That's really good, without creating a hardship, it's an amount of time and we could fix it, and, you know, I'm not a fan of the freestanding signs if the building is close enough to the street.
But if you
really
did it
do.
over, I mean, that's a long period of time.
Yeah, the signs probably have to be repainted in that time
Right.
frame anyway, so.
Yeah,
Or a
just-
change of users.
Yes.
Well,
So
change of
maybe
use,
upon
change of use, they would
change-
automatically
No.
have to
So
comply.
wait a minute, we tied to the property, not the user, right?
The size of the sign could still stay, you just change the
Usually,
insert, right?
business
Change- if
change
there's
because
a-
the sign is
If there's a commercial piece of property, it's being, a new tenant's coming in, and there's a
Right.
frame, and they just take out the name and put a new name in, that frame can stay. It's grandfathered?
Right now?
Yeah. Yeah, I know, so that's the problem.
Yeah, everything is grandfathered.
Right.
There's no requirement.
That's my point though, so if you had a new user in a retail space, by the way the code is written now, the user wouldn't have to come to get approval for a new sign on the sides. That's where it would probably make sense to tweak it, so upon change of user, it would trigger.
Or
So
we
that
have
would
to
fix
fix
some
it
of
in
it.
X number of years.
Or 10 years or whatever.
I'm surprised that a new user who wants to change the sign wouldn't have to automatically comply,
No,
because
right,
it's a new sign.
Well, they should.
If it's a new sign, yes. If they are taking vinyl letters off and putting new vinyl letters on in the same space, that's not really, you know, change.
Should we put in the code
I think we
that
should.
every new user has
To be
to come
more
up?
specific.
Basically a new,
Yeah.
a change of user,
Yeah.
just one, and then it could just be time, right?
Right.
Or 5 or 10 years. That way it automatically starts to control but over time, it'll correct itself.
John just had a really great
No, I think that
suggestion.
actually should be the code enforcement officer's first priority, is to do a survey of all the signage, because I don't think that everyone is in compliance. I mean, clearly, right on Main Street, we're not, so, but I think that's a great idea, Mike. If it's a change of use or within X number of years,
Automatically, yes.
they have to,
Right, so when you look at the revised, when you deal with the revised sign law, we'll incorporate that.
right.
I may want to create a hardship, but I think the time frame, 5 or 10 years.
No, that's,
And upon a new user, I think that's reasonable, that it's a new business or a new user, they
They're gonna be
get a new
changing
sign,
anyway.
comply with the new.
Not to hold it to you, but is there some consensus of how long that time period, at least what the draft should say?
I just say 10 years because it's less invasive, but if you guys feel 5 is proper,
I'm fine with that.
That's the
I
seven.
just don't want to create hardships for business owners that are investing in.
All right, well, I'll pick a number in that range and then
All right.
we will discuss it.
You know, in the back burner department, speaking of signs, I don't know who's responsible for the eagle, but our eagle is starting to look pretty needy. And that sign's gonna have to come down and refurbished at some point, which won't be cheap, so I don't know whose budget that is, I suspect it's,
Beautification, but.
Last time it was done with volunteer.
was it?
Get the Lions Club to do the eco.
Yeah. that way it's good.
You know, get Tony to climb up there, he's retired, and do it for us.
We'll get your tool.
Some of the eagle's feathers have already dropped off.
Use the puppy truck.
It's starting to
Were
turn.
you in town when they put that original eagle up in 1976?
Yes, I was.
Me too, I thought it was
What
temporary.
was his name? What was that? We helped put it together. What was the guy's
He
name?
just
Who
didn't
was-
make
Ray
it
Bell?
No.
Was it Landry?
The guy who was the library.
We did the.
Oh, Charles Elson?
Yes, Elson.
That's
Yeah.
right.
There wasn't for Elson, there wouldn't be an eagle there.
Adam, I just said, this is a little kind of off, but, you know, a lot of towns have, you know, in residential, they have very strict guidelines in terms of making changes to the facade of the building. I mean, and I know that we don't want to really go down that path, but it seems to me when, you know, I don't know where you strike the balance, where someone does something that's so dissimilar to what was there prior and what the kind of existing neighborhood looks like, and there's really no.
You mean residential?
Yeah, residential, yeah, I mean, and I can think of a couple of examples, there's a, well, you know, Leslie Zane's former house, where it's kind of a 1970s colonial, and they basically removed all the windows and put in these kind of black, well, actually only did half of the front of the house. And it's, you know, because it's the same size, the town doesn't really have any
Yeah, I mean, they put in,
new windows, yeah, tinted windows, yeah.
yeah, that's something we don't look at.
I mean, it's.
Anyone did half of them?
Well, he hasn't done the entire, or she hasn't done the entire house, but it's just it's right over near the high school.
Okay.
And it just, you know, the town clearly doesn't have any, you know, ability to, well, I mean, even make sure the guy does all the windows, but
No.
I'm just with the facade of a house, I mean, I'm not concerned about that. I mean, I'm
Well,
a big
if
believer in the RPRC, I don't
Yeah.
want to start.
If the facade is changing, that is something the RPRC looks at. You know, the vast majority of them don't require, that they usually don't.
But what do you define as a change in the facade?
Windows wouldn't be.
Yeah, windows would not be. because,
Siding is not included, paint color is not included.
Paint color, definitely not, because that doesn't require a building permit.
It's anything that triggers a building permit.
We had someone come to the town meeting last time where they were looking at an actual house design, and the neighbors were quite upset about it. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the definition is exceedingly dissimilar or something, isn't that
You
what
know,
isn't that what they say?
the
in the code?
reality is, if you're coming in with a house that has a stunning design,
Yeah,
and it's different from the other houses in the neighborhood, but it's a really fine design of this era.
right.
And all the other houses are from 1963 to 1982. And they're not necessarily good design. They kind of conform to each other. But these houses are going to start in a few years being replaced. Anyway, so it's like the first person who came into Windmill and built the larger house. It starts, and then it dominoes after that.
Right.
And we have a fine line here.
That design that may be dissimilar for North White Plains, but it's not dissimilar in other parts of the town.
Oh, not at all.
Right.
With that house, just so it blends in the meantime, while the neighborhood is catching up, was there a landscape design that could sort of
There,
soften
you
it?
know, it sits beautifully on this property.
So have we exhausted our discussion on the Hamlet design study? What do you think? And John, you had asked us to have a look at the
No, I just,
Common
yeah,
Square.
I hadn't really seen that. Had you seen the new, I hadn't really seen the new
Is there
plans.
any extra?
Yeah. These aren't the color ones, but
Where is the grocery store ones?
the back, on the back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So what's, can you take us here now, and what's what?
Okay.
Yeah, get it away.
Well, the front page,
A through 10.
those are buildings A and B, but those remain the same.
Okay. So, no, well, which one's which? So this,
These are all.
These are fronting,
Yeah,
these
these
are
are Main
fronting Main Street, and then there's a
Yeah.
Right, well, what you see
pedestrian
from,
walkway.
what you see from Main Street is labeled 2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Right, 1 and 4 are the length of them along the access going into the parking.
Mhm.
Right, so they're perpendicular to Main Street. And on the
Is
back,
this going to be built right now, too?
yeah,
Okay, good.
So these have multi facades also, they have brick and then also ductwork.
And the square footage of each of these is what?
it's on the chart.
I think it's probably 12,000.
And
You
how much
know what? I
is
don't
residential? and
23,000 feet total,
For the two?
I don't
for A and B, yeah.
And how much above it is residential?
The top floor.
Top floor of both buildings, 11
Above
units,
the-
10 to 11 units.
So it'll be 10 to 11.
Yeah, but you don't have the grocery store here.
No,
Valerie,
we don't.
Valerie, you were supposed to have the grocery store as well. I made copies, but they're not.
Okay.
Sorry, I have to say.
The original residential unit was supposed to be how much? It was supposed to be, how many units?
You mean the old plan?
Yeah.
Where we are.
There were,
Yes, we.
there were about
We
50
have
units.
to.
How many?
About 50.
They didn't.
So it reduced,
Residential?
Yeah, it was.
It
No,
reduced-
21.
yeah,
It wasn't that.
What was it?
so it reduced in half the amount
Oh,
of
50
residential
was the
units.
plan. We had a plan of 50, but you're right. These buildings always had residential. These buildings are no different than
Correct.
the original plan.
No, no,
Not
they are
And
the
then
same.
what's missing is there was a separate freestanding residential building that's been eliminated to accommodate the supermarket.
Right.
Well, with retail on the first floor, residential on the second floor. And then there was another building,
The clock tower
the
building.
clock tower building, that had an apartment and retail.
I will tell you that the landscape plan is kind of thin throughout the site, but it is robust between the historic district and the southern border. They've got it screened pretty well, so that the historic district is, between the southern border here and the northern border of the historic district, there is a knee wall, there is a fence, and there is a double stack of vegetation.
That's good.
So it's a, without question, a big separation. The rest of the
This
site,
was not on the original planning board site plan we approved.
What?
So,
That was subsequent.
Right.
Yeah,
And
the
the
landscaping
vegetation.
Well,
is
they made it bigger, we made it bigger.
Double
Good,
row.
that's good.
wonderful.
there's the rest of the landscape plan. And by the way, if anyone's interested in seeing the landscape plans, we're approving a revision to that plan Monday night. So they'll be showing it again.
Also, they're coming in.
They're coming in for a revision to the plan to accommodate the settlement between 37 Maple and Armonk Square,
Oh, okay.
and
This
to
why-
hopefully
this why is the
extinguish
difference,
the Article
okay.
78.
Is there landscaping in the parking lot?
Yes, there's landscaping in the
It has to
parking
be,
lot.
it has to be certain.
And then there's, most of the site is impervious, it's paved because it's in the Hamlet area. So off of Main Street, there are some stone walls in the middle of the stone wall that we'll be planting. And then there are tree grates for street trees throughout the property. There's an open
Do
lawn.
they have room for it?
Just to review, so I remember correctly, the sidewalk on Main Street's gonna be redone, but not Maple now? Was it originally gonna be the
The
Maple side?
maple, yeah, originally the applicant was.
Why did we scale that back?
That's what the applicant brought in, that's what was negotiated, I guess, before.
So we're not gonna get new sidewalks on Maple, only on Main Street?
No, you're gonna get new sidewalks on Main Street and the frontage that they own on Maple.
Just that little piece where they are.
But
So it's gonna be new,
Main
and
Street,
then-
they're doing the entire,
Oh,
There's a 175-foot gap
on Maple.
on Maple, which is the piece that is not frontage of this property. It's along the
from
side of
Framings.
where Framings is, so all of those
In
buildings.
front of those
Yeah,
residential.
that was in the original plan. Somehow it got left off of the plan that's been
Can we
approved.
focus on that now, like as a town, because if they're doing it, can we piggyback on it in some way and
Uh,
get the cost, or?
I've already-
I just would love to see that done.
We're actually working on some thoughts on that.
Are you?
In
Okay.
anticipation of that, I've got all of the, see, we know what it will cost per linear and per square foot, because it's actually, the Armonk Square engineering is the same as the east side, pardon me, the west side, so we know what it costs, because it was done already. So I'll be able to come up with a cost of that 175 missing square feet that I think the town should pay. And if we get the same contractor to do it at the same time,
Exactly.
there is a substantial savings, because to go back and do it,
Right.
you're gonna see it, because you can never get a contractor to finish a job and come
The
back a
payments
year
will
later and
never
make it
match.
look the same. So my recommendation eventually is going to be that the town engage the same contractor to do the work at the same time. We're not exactly sure when the Armonk Square people are going to do the sidewalk. We're encouraging them to do it right away. But right now, their thinking is they don't want to do the sidewalk until such time as they can do the pedestrian walk between these two buildings. Because again,
So
that's
that
the
matches.
same
Matches.
material.
Then from the edge of their building down in front of like Torlish's building and all these here, is that included in sidewalks?
No.
Can there be any encouragement to have that happen? Because I'd love to see people come from the park and be able to walk up and go into our town.
Well, you'll know what it will cost to do that, and I suppose the town can make the decision to use its budget somehow to complete it all the way to the Torlish, or otherwise, as Adam will tell you, you have to wait for those owners to need to do something that requires them to come to the town, and now you have the arm-twisting ability to cause them to fix the sidewalk. That'll be your options.
But you can still walk from the park, because the sidewalk's on
In
the
the
far
park.
side of Maple, up, and you can cross the street. The other thing, and Diane mentioned it before, with respect to the sidewalk now, is if there is a thought to put even the tubing of the lines under the sidewalk for the electrical wires and such,
I don't think,
I'm just saying, if that ended up happening, that's gotta happen while you're tearing up the sidewalk. You don't wanna put the new sidewalk in and then put those trunk lines or those
but
lines.
the numbers we're getting are so.
Not to put the lines in, but just to
Put the
put the
conduits.
conduit in, just in case we decided to do that. Because weren't they working up two prices for us just to put the
Yeah.
conduit in?
No, I think we should have another meeting with Lindstorm, get an update of what our options are for preparing for the future, for putting the wires for the town underground, because it's the most important physical characteristic we could do for this community, is putting those wires underground.
But if the cost to put the lines is prohibitive, but while you dig it up,
Absolutely.
Right.
put the conduit in, just saying that.
Is Lindstar the company that does that? Why is Lindstar?
They're the electrical company that figures out how much and what type of wires and how big a conduit and the physicality of doing it. And we've contracted them to do this study. I've been working on it for how many years now? A couple of years. So, but we're getting closer. The price keeps going up, but we're getting more options available. So we need to progress on this, because the timing is happening now. The sidewalks are going to happen. We need to have decisions made.
Yeah, I think, there's one more component that, and I don't have the numbers yet, but there's no requirement for Armonk Square to put in drainage on that side of Main Street. It's on the east side, because I think Mike Ferrari, when he did that work, was required to put in drainage. There is no requirement for drainage now, at least to be paid for by Armonk Square, but I am sure John Kellard is going to tell us that we need the drainage, because there's a crown in every road, so in the absence of a drainage plan, I think you're going to have a problem. So I've asked John Kellard to address that and to see what he thinks is necessary.
That's crucial, because your road is only as good as your drainage, and if you don't have the drainage,
Right.
I think Mike makes a great point, just my background being construction and understanding costs, what things do, if you can, while the sidewalk is open, put in conduits, which should not be at a significant cost just to put empty conduits in. I think it's a great idea.
Any comments on, other comments on the
So
website?
yes, what are the action items, Adam?
Are we done? Because I have to leave.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Nice
coming.
to see you.